I still remember that day. The sun was just beginning to rise, casting a soft golden light over the streets. There was a quiet hum in the air, the kind of calm that never lasts long before chaos arrives. I had been sitting by the window with a cup of tea, trying to enjoy a rare moment of peace, when my phone rang. It was my cousin. Her voice was sharp, almost urgent. "We need you. The wedding is in 2 days, and we need you to babysit the kids." I froze, the cup trembling in my hands. Baby said, "How many kids?" 15, she said. 15, my mind raced. I had never babysat more than 2 kids at a time. And now my whole family was expecting me to take care of 15 of them during the wedding ceremony, the reception, and everything in between. Panic mixed with a strange sense of disbelief. I tried to speak, to ask for a delay or maybe a reason why I was being chosen, but her tone was firm, almost demanding. "You're the only one we can trust. Everyone knows you're responsible." My heart pounded. I looked around the room, imagining the chaos. Tiny feet running across shiny floors, shrill laughter and cries, spilled juice, lost shoes, endless questions. And I had barely managed to survive a day with my little niece last summer. My thoughts were interrupted by the sound of the kettle whistling. Even that small sound made me jump. Everything felt sharper that morning. The truth was, my family didn't just want me to watch the kids, they wanted me to manage them all alone. I could hear their plans clearly. A wedding so perfect with every detail in place. And I, apparently, was part of the plan. I tried to imagine how it would go. 15 little faces staring up at me, expecting guidance, patience, smiles. I would have to be everything: teacher, nurse, entertainer, mediator, chef all at once. I put my hands on my face, trying to think of a solution. That's when I noticed a strange feeling creeping over me, a mix of fear and excitement. Fear because this was impossible. Excitement because, well, I had an idea. I couldn't let my family think I would just agree. I needed to do something they would never see coming. The next hours were a whirlwind. I walked around my room, made a mental list of supplies I might need, snacks, toys, first aid, but mostly I was thinking of the plan I had just formed. It was risky, bold, maybe even reckless. But it was the only way I could survive this. I knew if I just agreed, my sanity would be gone by the end of the wedding day. I couldn't let that happen. By the afternoon, my family called again, excited and busy with wedding arrangements. They were laughing, talking about seating, flower arrangements, the photographer, and every little detail that seemed unimportant at that moment but would surely stress them out later. And then the reminder, don't forget, 15 kids. You'll be in charge. Their voices were full of trust, almost blind trust, and I felt a shiver. I couldn't disappoint them, but I also couldn't let myself be trapped into a day I was not ready for. I remember pacing back and forth as the shadows grew longer in my room. Outside, the streets were alive with people preparing for the wedding. Cars honking, music playing from somewhere far away. The smell of fresh flowers mixed with food from nearby kitchens. Everything seemed normal, but inside me a storm was brewing. I had to make a decision, and then I made it. I decided I wouldn't be babysitting those 15 kids. I had a plan that would shock everyone, even me. I didn't yet know if it would work, but I felt a strange surge of courage. The kind that only comes when you realize you have no other choice. I started making calls, sending messages, preparing small distractions and arrangements. Each step felt like walking on thin ice. One wrong move and my entire family would be furious. But one right move, and maybe, just maybe, I could survive the wedding without losing my mind. Just as I was about to sit down and finalize my plan, I heard a soft knock on the door. My heart leaped into my throat. Who could it be? Nobody was supposed to visit. The knock came again, this time heavier, almost demanding. I opened the door slowly, and there, standing with a half smile and an unreadable look in his eyes, was my cousin's younger brother. I didn't know he was coming, and in that instant I realized he knew something about my plan. And then, just as I was about to speak, he whispered, "Are you really going to do it?" Or are you going to change everything? I froze, unable to answer, because at that moment I realized the choice I was about to make would change everything. I still remember that day. The air was thick with tension, and even the sunlight seemed hesitant as it spilled into my room. I stared at him, my cousin's younger brother, wondering how much he had seen, how much he already guessed. His eyes were calm, but there was a glint of mischief, or maybe challenge, that made my stomach twist. I wanted to speak, to explain, to convince him that I had a plan, but my voice caught in my throat. He stepped inside without waiting for an answer, closing the door quietly behind him. "You know," he said softly, leaning against the doorframe, "you're the only one who could pull this off. But are you really going to?" His words hung in the air, heavy like a storm cloud. I wanted to scream that yes, I would do it. Yes! I could handle 15 kids, but deep down I knew I couldn't. Not the way my family imagined. Not without losing myself. I sank into the chair by the window, my hands gripping the armrests. I have a plan," I admitted, my voice trembling slightly. "It might work, or it might backfire completely." I avoided looking at him directly. Somehow, looking into his eyes made my thoughts scatter like leaves in the wind. He chuckled quietly. "Backfire, huh? That sounds interesting." Then he paused and leaned closer. "Tell me. I promise I won't tell anyone." Yet, for a moment, I hesitated. Could I trust him? Could I reveal the secret of my plan? But the truth was, I needed an ally. I needed someone to help me navigate the storm my family had unknowingly set in motion. I took a deep breath and began explaining the idea I had crafted in the hours since my first call from my cousin. I would create a series of small, believable distractions. Little things that would keep the kids occupied without anyone noticing. Maybe a scavenger hunt. Maybe a special treasure game. Anything to keep them busy while I slipped away when needed. I told him about the props I had collected, the little instructions I had written down, the timing I had calculated. His expression changed from curiosity to surprise. "You're serious about this?" he said, shaking his head slightly. "You might actually pull it off." But he hesitated, and I could see the gears turning in his mind. "You're going to need help. More than just me." I froze. Help. My plan was supposed to be quiet, small, contained. The thought of involving anyone else made me nervous. But before I could argue, he reached into his pocket and pulled out a small notebook. He flipped it open, revealing a list of names. "These people," he said, pointing to the names one by one, "are reliable. They owe me favors. They can help with timing, monitoring, even keeping some of the kids occupied. You don't have to do this alone." My heart raced. The idea of allies was tempting. But it also meant exposing my plan to more people, which increased the risk. What if someone spilled the secret to my family too soon? What if everything collapsed before the wedding even began? But at the same time, I felt a strange sense of relief. Maybe this wouldn't be impossible after all. Maybe, just maybe, I could survive this day and still come out unscathed. We spent the next few hours mapping out possibilities. The sounds outside shifted, children laughing as they passed by. The distant honking of cars, the faint music from nearby weddings. Each sound reminded me of the chaos that was about to descend. And yet, in that quiet room with my unlikely ally, I felt a strange sense of control. I was no longer just reacting. I was planning, maneuvering, preparing. But just as I was starting to feel a glimmer of confidence, there was a sudden knock at the front door. A harsh, impatient knock, followed by voices I recognized immediately. My family, my cousin, my aunt, my older relatives, all calling my name. "Where are you? We need you now. The wedding preparations are almost done." Panic surged through me. We weren't ready yet. The plan wasn't fully in place. And if they came in now, if they saw me scheming, preparing, talking with someone outside the family circle, it would be disaster. I glanced at him, my heart pounding. "They're here," I whispered. "What do we do?" He smiled, a little too calmly for my nerves. "Relax. Just follow my lead. You trust me, right?" I wanted to say yes, but my voice was gone. I could only nod, and then the door began to open, slowly, almost deliberately. And in that moment, I realized something terrifying. One of the kids had somehow gotten out of their room and was standing right behind the door. A small boy with wide eyes and a mischievous grin, holding something in his hands. Something that could ruin everything. I still remember that day. The small boy behind the door froze for a moment, clutching something tightly in his tiny hands. His wide eyes darted between me and the hallway outside, as if he knew he had stumbled upon a secret no one was supposed to see. My heart pounded so hard I thought it would burst out of my chest. Every plan I had made the careful distractions, the backup helpers, the quiet escapes now felt fragile. Like it could shatter with a single misstep. I took a slow, cautious step forward. Hey there, I said softly, trying to keep my voice calm. What do you have there? The boy's grip didn't loosen. His lips quivered, and for a moment I feared he might scream or run straight into my family's arms. But then, slowly, he held out a small, shiny object. It was a toy ring-bright plastic, probably from one of the kids' playsets. Relief and anxiety collided inside me. It wasn't dangerous, but it was enough to alert the others if anyone saw it. I smiled gently and whispered, "Good job finding that. Can you help me with something?" I knelt to be at his level and showed him the small notebook my cousin's brother had brought. I explained in simple words that we had a secret mission, just a fun game for the kids. But that we had to be very quiet so no adults saw. His eyes lit up with excitement, and for a moment, I felt a small wave of hope. Maybe, just maybe, I could manage this after all. But my relief was short-lived. From the hallway, I could hear the faint rustle of adult voices growing louder. My family was moving closer. They were excited, chatting about flowers, seating, and everything else that felt meaningless compared to the chaos that was about to unfold. My stomach twisted. I had planned for distractions, for clever timing, for small interventions. But I hadn't planned for my family barging in so early. "Quick," my cousin's brother hissed. "Hide the notebook. They can't see it." I shoved it under the couch and motioned for the boy to follow me. We crept toward the side room, trying not to make a sound. Every step felt like walking on glass. I could feel my pulse in my ears. The sound of laughter and chatter from the hallway was almost deafening. I tried to control my breathing, but each breath was shallow, tense. Once we were behind the closed door of the side room, I exhaled sharply. Okay, I whispered. "We're safe for now." The boy looked at me with wide, trusting eyes, and I felt a strange responsibility more than before. If I messed up now, it wasn't just about me. It was about 15 kids, my family's expectations, and the chaos that would follow. We spent the next few hours quietly organizing. I enlisted the help of the few neighbors and friends my cousin's brother had mentioned. Each person took a small task, keeping a group of kids entertained with simple games. Watching over the snacks, making sure no one ran off. It felt like building a fragile web, one careful thread at a time. I could feel the tension in the air, thick and electric. Every sound from outside, the clinking of dishes, the low hum of conversation, the distant music from the wedding preparations made me jump. By mid-afternoon, I thought we were ready. The kids were gathered in small groups, engaged in activities, laughing and playing, completely unaware of the chaos looming just beyond the walls. I felt a small sense of victory, a spark of confidence. Maybe this would work. Maybe I could actually do it. But then a loud crash echoed from the main hall. My heart stopped. The sound of broken glass or a dropped vase. I couldn't tell. I froze listening. The adults murmured in surprise, and then I heard it one of the older kids, probably 8 or 9, shouting in alarm. My stomach dropped. I grabbed the boy from earlier and whispered, "Stay here, don't move, trust me." But as I peeked through the slightly open door, I saw a sight that made my blood run cold. A line of children had escaped the play area and were heading straight toward the wedding hall, their tiny feet pounding the polished floors. Behind them, my cousin's mother shouted in alarm, realizing that the kids were out of control. Panic surged through me. This was the moment I had feared, the first real test of my plan. The careful timing, the secret distractions, all of it hung by a thread. I knew if I didn't act fast, the wedding would descend into chaos, and my family would never forgive me. And then, just as I was about to rush out, my cousin's younger brother appeared beside me, a calm but serious look on his face. "You need to make a choice right now," he said. "Do you follow the plan or improvise?" I opened my mouth, but the words wouldn't come. I could see the children running, the adults panicking, and the fragile web I had built beginning to unravel. I still remember that day. The sound of tiny feet pounding the polished floors of the wedding hall echoed in my ears like a warning bell. My heart was racing so fast I was sure everyone could hear it. 15 children running toward a room full of delicate decorations. Fragile glass and expensive flowers. It was a disaster waiting to happen. I could hear my family's shocked voices from behind the hallway doors, calling for the kids, panicked and confused. I took a deep breath, trying to calm myself, but panic clawed at my chest. My cousin's younger brother was beside me, his face unreadable, almost eerily calm in the chaos. "You have to act now," he said. "Quick thinking. Don't just run after them blindly. You'll make it worse." I nodded, trying to steady my shaking hands. I glanced at the boy I had been hiding earlier. "Stay here. Don't move," I whispered. His small nod and wide eyes reminded me how much responsibility I had. How much could go wrong in just a few seconds? I sprinted toward the hall, my mind racing faster than my legs. As I entered, I saw the children scattering like a flock of birds. One little girl grabbed a vase from a table and almost dropped it. Another boy was swinging from a chair, oblivious to the polished floor beneath him. The sight made my stomach churn. I knew one wrong move could ruin everything, and not just for me, but for the whole wedding. I raised my hands and called out as loudly as I could. "Stop, everyone, listen to me." My voice shook, but the children paused just long enough for me to grab the nearest two and redirect them toward a corner. I quickly improvised, turning empty tables and chairs into small barriers, guiding the kids into a safer area. Each step was tense, each second a battle against chaos. Somewhere in the background, I could hear my family's footsteps approaching. I felt their eyes on me, judging every move I made. I couldn't fail. I had worked too hard to prepare for this. Just when I thought I had half the kids contained, a loud crash echoed through the hall. My heart sank. One of the older boys had climbed onto a chair and knocked over a plate of food, sending it crashing to the floor. The noise drew the attention of the other children, and suddenly the hall erupted in screaming, running and shrieking. I froze for a split second, overwhelmed by the chaos. My cousin's younger brother appeared beside me again, and without a word, grabbed my hand and pulled me toward the side of the hall. "We have to split up. You take one group, I'll take the other," he whispered. I nodded, swallowing the lump in my throat. Splitting up meant dividing my strength, but I had no choice. I focused on the closest cluster of children, using my voice and body language to calm them, leading them toward the safe corner. Slowly, with patience and careful guidance, I managed to get a few to sit down and play quietly with some small toys I had stashed in my bag, but then I heard a scream that made my blood run cold. One of the toddlers had gotten too close to the edge of the wedding stage. I spun around, my stomach twisting, and saw him teetering dangerously, his tiny hands clutching the edge. Without thinking, I dashed forward and grabbed him just in time, pulling him back into my arms. My heart was hammering, my hands trembling, but at least he was safe. As I looked around, I realized something terrifying. Despite all my planning, despite all my preparations, I was barely keeping up. The children were unpredictable, energetic, and relentless, and the clock was ticking. The wedding ceremony would start soon, and if I didn't get the kids under control, it would be chaos in front of everyone. I glanced at my cousin's younger brother, who was still managing his group of kids like some sort of calm, silent commander. How? How are you so calm?" I gasped, breathless. He gave me a small, knowing smile. "Experience," he said simply, "and a little luck." I swallowed, knowing I didn't have either. I was relying entirely on improvisation, hope, and the strange courage that had carried me this far. And yet, as I guided another group of children into a safe corner, I felt a flicker of confidence. Maybe I could pull this off. Maybe I could survive the day without total disaster. But just as I was beginning to think I had a handle on the situation, a sudden scream froze me in place. It was loud, shrill, and unmistakable. One of the children had run straight into the wedding photographer, knocking over a large camera tripod. The camera toppled with a crashing sound, spinning across the floor. I felt my stomach drop. That camera had cost hundreds, maybe thousands of dollars. And worse, the photographer was glaring at me, his face red with anger. My family was just behind him, rushing into the hall. Their expressions went from panic to disbelief to frustration in seconds. I realized with a sinking feeling that no matter what I did next, the chaos had been seen. My family's trust, their expectation that I could manage 15 kids alone, was on the verge of collapsing. And then, out of the corner of my eye, I saw him, the cousin's younger brother, grinning slightly as he corralled another group of children, completely unfazed. It made my heart race. What was he planning next? I still remember that day. The hall had transformed into a battlefield. 15 kids running in every direction. My family shouting instructions I couldn't even hear over the chaos. And the photographer shaking his head, clearly regretting ever bringing his camera. I was drenched in sweat, my heart pounding, every muscle tense. My plan, my careful preparations, were barely holding together. I looked around frantically, trying to gauge the damage. A toppled vase, a spilled tray of hors d'oeuvres. A few chairs overturned, minor accidents compared to what could have happened, but still enough to make my stomach twist. I knew my family was judging me. I could feel their eyes, their disbelief. My cousin's mother muttered something under her breath about how could she manage 15 kids alone. And I felt my cheeks burn with embarrassment and fear. And yet, amid the chaos, I noticed something strange. My cousin's younger brother, calm, collected. Like he was orchestrating some invisible symphony, was moving among the children, redirecting them, coaxing them with gentle words and small bribes of candy. He seemed to know exactly what to do in every moment, always one step ahead. It made me wonder, how much did he really know about managing children? And why had he stepped in so decisively? I was pulled out of my thoughts when a small girl ran straight toward the buffet table. Before I could react, she grabbed a plate of cake and nearly toppled it over. Instinct took over. I sprinted, catching her just in time, scooping her into my arms. The scent of frosting and sugar filled my nose, and she giggled, completely unaware of the chaos she was causing. My heart pounded, part frustration, part relief. At least she hadn't ruined anything important. Yet I set her down gently, and she ran off to join a small group that my cousin's brother had guided toward a safer corner. I exhaled shakily, realizing I was starting to rely on him more than I had intended. I had always thought I could handle this alone, that I could follow my own plan, but now I wasn't sure I could. Not without him. Then came a sound that made my stomach drop, a loud, sharp crack, followed by a high-pitched scream. One of the boys had climbed onto the stage, attempting to reach a decoration hanging above. I froze, my mind racing. If he fell, if he got hurt, my family would never forgive me. Without thinking, I bolted across the hall, reaching for him just as he wobbled dangerously on the edge. My fingers caught his sleeve, pulling him back to safety. I collapsed to my knees, heart hammering, the boy staring up at me with wide, innocent eyes. I couldn't even scold him. I was too scared, too relieved. I stood slowly, taking a moment to steady my racing pulse, when I noticed another problem. 2 younger children had slipped away entirely, heading straight for the wedding cake table. I could see the delicate tiers swaying dangerously, the frosting barely holding together. Panic surged through me. I had to stop them. Now I ran, grabbing one child and scooping up the other, my arms full, my balance precarious. The cake wobbled but stayed intact. I set the kids down in a safer spot, my heart still hammering. I glanced at my cousin's younger brother, who was managing the other children with an almost supernatural patience. His calmness frustrated me. How could he remain so composed while I was nearly losing my mind? And then I realized something terrifying. Despite all my efforts, one child was still unaccounted for. A small, mischievous boy with a grin that promised trouble was nowhere to be seen. I scanned the hall, dread coiling in my stomach. Where could he have gone? What was he planning? Before I could react, a loud crash came from the entrance. One of the older girls had run straight into a display of glassware, sending dozens of delicate glasses shattering to the floor. My family gasped, my cousin covering her mouth in horror. I felt a surge of panic, knowing that my plan, my careful distractions, were failing. I ran toward the noise, but my cousin's younger brother grabbed my arm. "Stop," he said firmly. "You can't chase them all at once. You need strategy, not panic." I stared at him, breathless, frustrated, and terrified. "Strategy," I gasped. "There's no strategy anymore. The wedding is turning into chaos." He smiled faintly. "There's always a way. But you have to trust me." And in that moment, I realized I didn't have a choice. I had to trust him. Even if it scared me, even if my instincts screamed at me to take control. I had to let go just as I nodded, acknowledging his words. I heard the unmistakable sound of running footsteps coming from the hallway outside. Not small children this time. These were heavier, faster, deliberate. I turned, my heart stopping. My family's oldest relative, who had just arrived, was marching toward the hall, anger written on every line of their face. And behind them, I saw a flash of something shiny in their hand. Something that could ruin everything we had barely managed to control. I still remember that day. My heart was hammering so hard I thought it might burst from my chest. The wedding hall had become a battlefield of chaos and panic. Children were running in all directions, glass and plates shattered across the floor. And my family's voices echoed, full of frustration and disbelief. And now my oldest relative was approaching, holding something shiny that made my stomach drop. I froze for a moment, trying to figure out what it was. A key. A piece of jewelry? No. It was the guest list clipped to a shiny gold-colored board. And they were glaring at me like I had personally destroyed the wedding. My heart raced. If they saw the children out of control, the mess, the chaos, they would blame me entirely. And I would have no one to defend me. I glanced at my cousin's younger brother. He gave me a subtle nod, a silent signal to stay calm and act fast. Somehow, he always seemed to know what to do, even when I was panicking. I took a deep breath, trying to steady my shaking hands. I rushed to the nearest group of kids, raising my voice over the noise. "Everyone, listen. Follow me." Some of them paused, others ignored me, but I didn't have a choice. I had to grab what control I could. Slowly, methodically, I began herding them toward a safer corner, using my voice, my hands, and every bit of patience I had left. But then I noticed something terrifying. One of the toddlers had wandered into the kitchen doorway, where hot dishes were being carried. A woman screamed as she noticed him just in time, but the fear in her voice made my stomach twist. I ran, scooping the child into my arms, shielding him from the potential danger. The heat from the kitchen brushed against my face, and the smell of cooked food mixed with the chaos around me. I felt a surge of frustration and fear. How could 15 kids, all small but energetic, be so impossible to control at once? My plan, which had seemed clever and feasible hours ago, was crumbling. And yet I had no choice but to keep going. My hands were full, my lungs burning from running, and every part of me ached, but I couldn't give up. Suddenly, my cousin's younger brother appeared at my side, guiding a group of children toward a small side room. "You focus on this group," he whispered. "I'll handle the others. Trust me." I wanted to argue, to tell him I didn't trust anyone right now, but there was no time. Nodding, I followed his lead, taking control of the children closest to me. For a few minutes, it seemed like we might actually succeed. The kids were distracted with small toys and games, sitting quietly, laughing softly. I allowed myself a small sigh of relief. Maybe, just maybe, this could work. But then came the scream that shattered the brief calm. One of the older boys had climbed onto a tall chair, trying to reach the chandelier. It wobbled dangerously above him, crystal ornaments swinging. I froze in horror, my heart in my throat. One false move, and the chandelier could fall, injuring someone or worse. Without thinking, I lunged forward, grabbing the boy by the waist just in time. He looked at me with wide, guilty eyes, and I could feel my pulse pounding in my ears. I set him down gently, trying to hide my fear, but the damage was done. The other children had seen the chaos, and a new wave of excitement ran through them. They started shouting, running, and climbing again. Panic surged through me. My cousin's younger brother called out to them, trying to calm them, but it was like shouting into a storm. The children were unstoppable, relentless. And then I noticed something even worse. One of the toddlers had taken a small, decorative item from a table and ran toward the wedding stage. I ran after him, heart pounding, trying to reach him before he caused more damage. And as I did, I felt someone grab my arm. I turned to see my cousin's older sister, her face a mix of shock and anger. "What is happening?" she demanded, her voice trembling. "How could you let this happen?" I opened my mouth, trying to explain, trying to tell her it wasn't entirely my fault, but words failed me. The sight of the children running, the mess, the chaos, it was overwhelming. I felt trapped, cornered, desperate. Then, when I thought I couldn't handle another second of panic, I felt a strange calm wash over me. My cousin's younger brother stood beside me, holding a small bag of candies. He whispered, "Follow my lead, one step at a time." I hesitated, fear and doubt mixing in my mind. Could I really trust him completely? Could we actually save the wedding, the children, and my sanity all at once? My hands were trembling, my heart pounding, but I nodded. I had no other choice, and that's when it happened. A loud crash, louder than anything before, echoed through the hall. I froze. I knew immediately which child it was, the mischievous little boy I had been tracking all along. He had toppled the decorative centerpiece, sending crystal and flowers scattering across the floor. My stomach dropped. I could see my family's shocked faces, their disappointment, their disbelief. The chaos had reached its peak. And in that instant, I realized I couldn't do this alone. Not now. Not ever. I still remember that day. The hall was a whirlwind of movement, noise, and panic. 15 kids running, shrieking, climbing, and knocking over everything in sight. My heart felt like it would explode from the fear and adrenaline. My family's voices were rising in panic, scolding, and disbelief. I had never felt so out of control in my life. But then I noticed something. My cousin's younger brother was moving among the chaos like a calm eye in the storm. He wasn't panicking. He wasn't shouting. Instead, he was quietly guiding, redirecting, and distracting the children with small gestures, whispered instructions, and even little bribes of candy. Each child seemed to respond to him almost instinctively, and the chaos slowly began to bend to his subtle control. I watched him with a mix of amazement and jealousy. How could he be so calm when everything else was falling apart? And then I realized something shocking. He had a plan. I hadn't understood it before, but now it was starting to make sense. The chaos wasn't entirely out of control. He was orchestrating it. He leaned toward me and whispered, "Follow my lead. Don't try to control everything yourself. Just guide one group at a time." I nodded, trying to steady my shaking hands. I took a deep breath and focused on one small group of children. Slowly, I guided them toward a corner, using toys, games, and small treats as distractions. My heart raced, but for the first time that day, I felt a small sense of control. Then came the unexpected twist. One of the older boys, the one who had been the most mischievous all day, ran straight for the wedding stage, trying to grab a hanging decoration. I ran after him, but before I could reach him, my cousin's younger brother stepped in. He grabbed the boy gently, but firmly lifted him up, and set him down safely in a corner where the other children were playing. I stared at him in shock. How had he done that so effortlessly? I realized he had been using subtle tricks all along, dividing the children into smaller groups, creating distractions, and gently manipulating their attention. The chaos hadn't been random. It had been carefully guided to keep the children occupied while preventing serious accidents. My mind raced. If this worked, we could actually survive the wedding day. But I knew we couldn't let our guard down. There was still so much that could go wrong. A wrong move, a sudden scream, or an unexpected adult entering the hall could unravel everything in an instant. And that's when it happened. From the far side of the hall, I heard a loud gasp. One of my relatives had spotted the small decorative centerpiece I had been guarding earlier, now lying broken on the floor. My stomach dropped. I had been so focused on the children that I hadn't noticed it had fallen. My family's eyes turned toward me, shock and disappointment written across their faces. I felt a wave of panic rising again. But my cousin's younger brother grabbed my arm. "Stay calm. Watch me," he said. He moved quickly, gathering the children in a circle around him, creating a small barrier between them and the adults. Then he whispered something to me, and I realized it was part of the master plan I hadn't understood until now. We weren't just controlling the children. We were controlling how my family saw the situation. I followed his instructions, guiding a few children to a side room, using games and candy as distractions while he dealt with the rest. Slowly, painstakingly, the hall began to settle. The children were calmer, more focused. The chaos that had seemed unstoppable was now manageable. I felt a wave of relief, but it was short-lived. Just as I thought we were getting control, I noticed one of the toddlers slipping away again, heading straight for the wedding cake table. My heart stopped. I ran toward him, but before I could reach him, a hand grabbed mine. It was my cousin's younger brother again. He held me back, a determined look on his face. "Trust me," he said, and in that moment I realized I had no choice but to trust him completely. The plan was bigger than I had understood. The chaos, the distractions, the careful guidance, it had all been orchestrated to survive this impossible challenge. But even as I nodded, my heart pounding, I felt a new wave of anxiety. Something about the way he moved, calm and confident, told me there was still a surprise waiting. A part of the plan I hadn't yet seen. Dud. And then it hit me. This wasn't just about controlling the children. It was about teaching me something too. I still remember that day. The hall felt like a storm had passed, leaving only a fragile calm in its wake. The children were quieter now, clustered in small groups, laughing softly or playing with toys. My family was still watching, some shaking their heads in disbelief, others muttering under their breath. I thought we might have survived the worst of it, but then I realized the biggest challenge had yet to come. I glanced at my cousin's younger brother, who was moving among the children with an almost invisible authority. He wasn't shouting. He wasn't panicking. He just guided, whispered, and smiled, and the kids responded like magic. I had never seen anything like it. I felt a mix of awe, jealousy, and relief. I still couldn't understand how he did it so easily, but I knew it was brilliant. And then it hit me. He had a final part of the plan, one I hadn't noticed until now. The mischievous little boy, the one who had caused the first crash, who had almost toppled the chandelier, and who had run straight into the wedding cake, was now sitting quietly, smiling, holding a small piece of paper. I froze. My heart sank. What was he holding? Could it ruin everything we had worked for? Before I could react, my cousin's younger brother leaned down and whispered in my ear, "Watch this." The boy suddenly stood up and ran toward the main hall, but instead of causing chaos, he handed the piece of paper to my cousin's mother. She looked down, confused. Then her eyes widened and a small smile spread across her face. I watched in shock as she read the note. It wasn't a complaint. It wasn't a warning. It was a treasure map. A game. My cousin's younger brother had turned the mischievous boy's energy into a game. A challenge that distracted him and entertained the other children at the same time. Each group of kids had a small task, a little adventure to complete, and they were so focused on it that the chaos melted away. I couldn't believe it. The plan had been genius all along. The chaos, the running, the mess had all been orchestrated to guide the children's attention and energy. The hall that had seemed like a disaster was now under control, almost magically. I felt a rush of relief, but also a strange sense of humility. I had thought I could manage everything on my own, that I had to control every child, every movement. But the truth was, I couldn't. I needed help, guidance, the little cleverness that I hadn't possessed on my own. As I watched, my family began to relax. Their frustration softened into amusement as they realized the children were engaged and entertained, not causing destruction. My cousin's mother laughed quietly, shaking her head. "I don't know how you did it," she said, nodding toward my cousin's younger brother. I felt a mixture of pride and embarrassment. I hadn't done it alone. But I had survived, and the children were safe. Then, just as I thought the worst was over, I heard a loud scream from the far side of the hall. One of the younger children had climbed onto a chair and was waving a small object in the air. My heart skipped a beat. What now? I ran toward the sound, my pulse racing, only to see. It was the shiny toy ring the small boy had found earlier. He was holding it up proudly, showing it to everyone. My family laughed, relieved that it was harmless. The tension in the hall lifted, replaced by a mixture of laughter and applause. And in that moment, I realized something important. I had faced chaos, fear, and pressure beyond anything I had ever imagined, and I had survived. Not alone, but with help, trust, and a little clever planning. But even as I smiled, a thought lingered in the back of my mind. A question that made my heart race. The wedding had been saved for now. But the real challenge, the one that would test everything I had learned, was still ahead. I still remember that day. The wedding hall had transformed from chaos to controlled excitement. Children were engaged in games, guided by clever tricks and distractions. And my family was starting to relax, laughing quietly as the children played. I felt a brief moment of relief, but it didn't last. Deep down, I knew the hardest part was still ahead. The ceremony was about to start. Guests were arriving, the hall was being decorated, and the clock was ticking faster than ever. I looked around, counting the children, making sure each one was in their designated area. Most of them were occupied, smiling, laughing, or quietly playing. But one child, the mischievous little boy, was still restless. He had a gleam in his eye that told me he wasn't done causing trouble. I could feel the pressure building inside me, tightening like a vice. My hands were clammy, my stomach knotted, and every sense was on high alert. I had learned a lot today: patience, strategy, and trust. But I also knew that one wrong step, one sudden scream, or one distraction could undo everything. Suddenly, I heard a shout from the entrance. The wedding photographer had just arrived with a large team, and the children, curious as ever, were drawn to the new arrivals. Cameras clicked, flashes went off, and some kids ran toward the photographers. Fascinated by the lights and equipment, panic surged through me. I ran toward them, trying to corral the children, but my cousin's younger brother grabbed my hand. "Stop. Let me handle this," he said calmly. And for a moment, I saw the magic again, how he could redirect the children without raising his voice. Using subtle gestures and soft words, slowly, the kids turned back toward their activities, completely absorbed once more. The ceremony was about to begin, and the children were finally under controller. So I thought. I was walking toward the hall entrance, catching my breath, when I realized one child was missing. My heart stopped. A toddler had wandered near the decorative fountain, the water glinting in the soft sunlight streaming through the windows. I ran, reaching him just in time, and scooped him up into my arms. Relief washed over me, but I could feel my family watching, their expressions a mixture of disbelief and admiration. They had expected disaster, and yet here I was, surviving, keeping the children safe. And then came the final test. The wedding photographer signaled for everyone to line up for pictures. Children, parents, and family members were all moving toward the stage. My heart raced as I guided the little ones, making sure no one ran or caused another accident. The tension in the air was almost unbearable. One child, The mischievous boy decided to climb onto the stage just as the photographer shouted, "Hold still." I froze, panic rising, but my cousin's younger brother stepped in like he always did. With a calm word, a gentle nudge, and a small piece of candy, he redirected the boy back to the group. I watched, amazed, as the children lined up quietly, smiles on their faces. And the ceremony began without another incident. I could hardly believe it. The chaos, the panic, the fear I had felt for hours had been contained, transformed into order by patience, strategy, and trust. As I looked around, my family approached me. My cousin's mother hugged me tightly. "I don't know how you did it," she whispered, her voice trembling with relief. My cousin's younger brother gave me a small nod. It's a quiet acknowledgement that I had survived my impossible challenge. I felt a wave of exhaustion, but also a strange pride. I had faced a storm I never imagined, and I had survived it. Not alone, but with guidance, trust, and a little cleverness. The wedding was saved, the children were safe, and somehow I'd made it through the day. But even as I smiled, I knew this experience had changed me. I had learned something vital, that chaos could be managed, that fear could be conquered, and that sometimes asking for help or trusting someone else's plan could save more than just a wedding. It could save your sanity. And as the ceremony continued, the children laughing quietly in their corners, I realized something else. The real surprise wasn't just the children's behavior or the chaos, it was how much I had grown, how much I had learned, and how resilient I truly was. I still remember that day. The sunlight streaming through the windows, the soft chatter of guests, and the laughter of children playing quietly in their corners. The wedding, which had once seemed like a disaster waiting to happen, was now unfolding beautifully. The hall was decorated perfectly. The guests were arriving. And the children, my 15 little challenges, were finally calm, happy, and engaged. I sank into a chair for a moment, exhausted. My heart still raced from the adrenaline of the past hours. My muscles ached from constant running and bending. And my mind replayed every moment of chaos, every near disaster, and every miraculous recovery. I realized how close we had come to complete disaster, and yet, somehow, we had survived. My cousin's younger brother approached me quietly, a small, knowing smile on his face. "You did well," he said softly. "You followed the plan, adapted, and stayed calm when it mattered most." That's not easy. I wanted to laugh, cry, and hug him all at once. I had doubted myself, panicked, and felt overwhelmed for hours. But in the end, I had survived. I had learned something important, that I didn't have to do everything alone. That asking for help or trusting someone's guidance could be a strength, not a weakness. That as I watched the children, now fully immersed in their treasure hunt game, I realized something else. They weren't just safe, they were happy, engaged, and learning small lessons in patience, teamwork, and following instructions. And in a way, so was I. The rest of the wedding went smoothly. Guests took photos, the ceremony began, and the laughter of children blended with the music and chatter around the hall. My family came up to me one by one, offering hugs, pats on the back, and grateful smiles. My cousin's mother whispered, "I can't believe how you handled this. You were amazing." I smiled, feeling a strange mix of pride and humility. I hadn't done it alone, but I had done it. I had faced my fear, managed chaos, and learned lessons I would never forget. Later, as the day settled into a gentle evening glow, I reflected on everything that had happened. The stress, the chaos, the laughter, the fear, all of it had taught me something invaluable. Life, much like that wedding day, could be unpredictable and messy. But with patience, trust, and clever thinking, even the most impossible situations could be managed. I still remember the final moment of the day, watching the children run freely, safe and happy, my family laughing, and the wedding hall shining with celebration. A wave of relief and gratitude washed over me. I had survived the impossible day. I had learned the value of teamwork, patience, and trust. And I knew I would never forget it. And to everyone watching this story, I want you to remember something too. Life will throw chaos at you. Fear will test you. You may feel overwhelmed and uncertain. But if you stay calm, trust the right people, and adapt with patience and courage, you can face even the most impossible challenges. If you enjoyed this story, please like, subscribe, and share your thoughts in the comments. And remember, sometimes the most chaotic days teach us the greatest lessons.